Okay, so someone hands you a ski resort. Not a rope tow on your neighbor's hill, the real thing. Chairlifts climbing into the clouds, fresh powder nobody's touched yet, a base village with steaming hot chocolate and a fireplace roaring after a full day on the mountain. People plan entire vacations around this place. They save up for it, they dream about it in July, and every single winter they show up ready to pay for the privilege of sliding down your mountain over and over again. It is not that simple. Owning a ski resort is one of the most weather-dependent, seasonally concentrated, and capital-intensive businesses in all of hospitality, because your entire annual revenue has to get generated in roughly 4 months, and a huge portion of whether those 4 months go well or badly is decided by something you have absolutely no control over: how much it snows. There are ski resorts that have built real estate empires and multi-generational wealth around a single mountain. And there are resorts that expanded aggressively during good years, took on enormous debt to do it, and collapsed the moment a few warm winters in a row exposed exactly how fragile that debt load really was. Here's the thing about this business. The snow is almost never the actual product you're selling. Let's be clear about what you're actually buying, because ski resort covers several very different business models. A large corporate-owned mega-resort, the kind operated by companies like Vail Resorts or Ultra Mountain Company, functions today more like a real estate and subscription business with a mountain attached, generating a huge share of its revenue from season passes and base area property development rather than single-day lift tickets. A small independent community hill operates a completely different business, usually family-owned or non-profit, serving a local population, running on razor-thin margins, and surviving almost entirely on whether the snow shows up on schedule each season. A private, members-only resort flips the model again, charging enormous upfront membership fees and annual dues to a small, wealthy membership base instead of chasing daily lift ticket volume from the general public. This script focuses mainly on the mid to large commercial resort model, the version most people actually picture when they imagine owning a ski mountain. Let's talk about what it actually costs to build or acquire one. A large modern ski resort, factoring in mountain terrain, lift infrastructure, snowmaking systems, and base area facilities, can represent hundreds of millions of dollars in total asset value, and that's before you even talk about ongoing capital investment. Chairlifts alone are a genuinely enormous line item. A modern high-speed detachable quad chairlift can cost anywhere from $3 to $8 million to install, and a large resort might operate a dozen or more lifts across the mountain, meaning the lift infrastructure alone on a major resort can easily represent $50 to $100 million in replacement value. Grooming equipment is its own category. A single snowcat, the specialized tracked vehicle that grooms trails overnight, costs somewhere around $300,000 to $500,000, and a resort of any real size needs a fleet of them working every single night the resort is open. Base area construction, lodges, rental shops, ski school facilities, restaurants, adds tens of millions more, and increasingly, the base village real estate itself, condos, hotels, retail space, has become a larger investment than the mountain operations it surrounds. Before you open the lifts, you also need infrastructure that most skiers never think about. Snowmaking is the single biggest hidden capital cost in the entire industry, and it has become almost mandatory for any resort that wants a reliable season length regardless of natural snowfall. A comprehensive snowmaking system covering a meaningful percentage of a resort's terrain requires hundreds of snow guns, miles of underground piping, dedicated water reservoirs or pumping rights from nearby water sources, and a power infrastructure capable of running that entire system continuously through the coldest, highest demand nights of the season. A large resort snowmaking system alone can represent tens of millions of dollars in capital investment, and running it consumes staggering amounts of electricity and water, with a single resort sometimes using hundreds of millions of gallons of water across a season. Avalanche control is its own specialized and genuinely dangerous infrastructure category, requiring trained personnel, explosive charges or compressed air launchers, and in some terrain, permanent avalanche mitigation structures built directly into the mountainside. And lift safety compliance, meaning the regular certified inspection, maintenance, and eventual replacement of aging lift equipment, is a continuous regulatory and financial obligation, because lift failures are rare but catastrophic events that can shut down an entire resort's operations and reputation overnight. Now let's talk about what it costs to run the thing every single season, because a ski resort's operating costs are unusually concentrated into an extremely short window. Staffing is the first major challenge, because a resort that might employ a skeleton crew of a few dozen people in the off-season can require several thousand seasonal employees, lift operators, ski patrol, instructors, food service, hospitality staff, the moment the season opens, creating an enormous seasonal hiring and training burden that repeats every single year. Snowmaking energy costs are the second major recurring expense, and they are directly tied to how uncooperative the weather is that particular season, meaning the years when you most need snowmaking to run at full capacity are often the same years when your energy bill is climbing the fastest. Insurance is the third major category, and it's a genuinely difficult one to price affordably, because liability coverage for a business involving chairlifts, avalanche terrain, and tens of thousands of amateur skiers moving at speed down a mountain is a specialized underwriting problem, and a single serious lift incident or on-mountain fatality can meaningfully affect a resort's insurance costs and reputation for years. Marketing and season pass administration round out the major categories, because in the current era of multi-resort pass networks, a huge amount of operating spend now goes toward maintaining the technology, partnerships, and marketing behind season pass products rather than simply printing daily lift tickets. Here's where the revenue model gets genuinely interesting, because it has fundamentally changed over the past 15 years. For most of ski industry history, the core revenue was the single-day lift ticket, priced individually at each mountain, with resorts competing purely on ticket price and terrain quality. Today, the dominant revenue model at most major resorts runs through multi-mountain season pass networks. A skier buys one season pass that grants access to dozens of resorts across an entire pass network, and the pass company distributes that revenue across all the participating mountains based on complex visitation sharing formulas. This is a fundamentally different business than selling individual lift tickets, because it converts what used to be unpredictable, weather-dependent daily transaction revenue into a large pool of committed, prepaid annual revenue collected months before the season even starts. Regardless of how much snow actually falls that winter, base area real estate is the second major revenue engine at most large resorts today. Condominium and hotel development, ongoing property management fees, and real estate transaction revenue from an area made desirable purely by its proximity to the mountain frequently generates as much or more profit than the mountain operations themselves. On-mountain retail, food and beverage, ski and snowboard rentals, and ski school lessons round out the picture, typically carrying strong margins because they capture a captive audience with limited alternative options once they are already on the mountain for the day. Let's build the two honest scenarios. In a good year, natural snowfall arrives early and consistently. Snowmaking costs stay manageable because the mountain isn't fighting the weather constantly. Season pass sales hit record numbers during the prior spring's early bird sales window, and base area real estate continues appreciating as buyers compete for a limited supply of slopeside property. A well-run major resort in a strong season might generate operating margins in a healthy range once fixed costs are covered, with real estate and pass revenue providing a stable floor underneath whatever the mountain operations themselves bring in that particular winter. In a bad year, a warm, dry winter delays opening day by weeks, snowmaking has to run overtime at maximum energy cost just to open a fraction of normal terrain. Day ticket walk-up visitors simply don't show up because there's nothing to ski on, and even season pass holders, whose money was already collected months earlier, become frustrated enough that renewal rates for the following year start to soften. Because so much of a resort's cost structure, staffing commitments, debt service, fixed snowmaking infrastructure, doesn't meaningfully shrink just because the snow didn't show up, a genuinely bad winter can turn what looked like a stable business into a serious cash flow problem almost overnight. The clearest real-world illustration of what happens when this business gets over-leveraged is the story of American Skiing Company. During the 1990s, American Skiing Company aggressively acquired a portfolio of well-known resorts, including Sunday River, Sugarloaf, and eventually the massive Killington Resort in Vermont, financing much of that expansion with significant debt while betting on continued growth in both skier visits and base area real estate development. When the broader real estate market cooled in the following decade and a stretch of inconsistent winters hit visitation at several of its properties, the company found itself carrying a debt load its actual mountain operations and real estate sales couldn't comfortably service. American Skiing Company was forced to sell off marquee properties, including Killington itself, to pay down debt, and the company was eventually delisted from public markets and restructured entirely. Dramatic fall for a company that a decade earlier had been one of the largest ski resort operators in the country. The mountains themselves never stopped being valuable assets. The debt taken on to expand faster than the underlying weather-dependent cash flow could reliably support is what actually broke the company. Now here's the twist that explains why sophisticated operators have restructured this entire industry around a completely different strategy over the past decade and a half. The rise of multi-resort season pass networks, Vail Resorts Epic Pass and Ultras Icon Pass being the two dominant examples, exist specifically to solve the exact problem that broke companies like American Skiing Company. By pooling dozens of resorts across completely different mountain ranges, the Rockies, the Northeast, the Pacific Northwest, into a single pass product, a bad snow year in one region gets offset by a good snow year somewhere else in the same portfolio, smoothing out the single biggest structural risk in the entire industry, the fact that any one mountain's revenue depends almost entirely on local weather it cannot control. This is precisely the same diversification logic that shows up throughout this series, spreading risk that's specific to one location across a much broader portfolio, except here the diversification is geographic and meteorological rather than financial. Layered on top of that, the base area real estate strategy means the most valuable long-term asset at many resorts today isn't really the lift infrastructure or even the terrain itself. It's the real estate value created by controlling the only meaningful land within walking distance of that terrain, a scarcity-driven asset that continues appreciating in value regardless of whether last Tuesday's snowfall hit the forecast. What separates the ski resort operators who build lasting wealth from the ones who repeat the American Skiing Company story is almost never the quality of the mountain itself, since plenty of world-class terrain has gone bankrupt under the wrong ownership structure. What actually determines the outcome is whether the business diversified its revenue away from single-day, weather-dependent ticket sales into season pass networks and real estate that can absorb a bad winter without collapsing, and whether the debt taken on to grow was sized to the mountain's realistic, weather-adjusted cash flow rather than to an optimistic projection of how many good snow years were coming next. The mountain will always make its own decisions about how much snow falls each winter. Whether the business built around that mountain survives long enough to profit from the good years and endure the bad ones is an entirely different question.